Hello everyone! Tonight we are stepping into the winding, lantern-lit streets of Edo, Japan, where the air hums with the chatter of merchants and the clatter of wooden sandals. Picture yourself standing on a narrow street, the scent of grilled fish wafting from a nearby stall, while tightly packed wooden houses loom overhead, their paper windows glowing softly. It's beautiful, chaotic, and honestly, a fire trap waiting to happen. You're in the heart of Edo, the city that became modern Tokyo, where every spark could spell disaster. And you probably won't survive this. Fires here were relentless, swallowing whole neighborhoods in hours. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's enjoy our evening ride together. You shuffle along a crowded Edo street, the year somewhere around 1700, though nobody's checking calendars too closely. The city's alive, vibrant, with hawkers shouting about their wares and kids darting through the crowd, probably pickpocketing someone's rice balls. You're surrounded by wooden buildings. Beautiful, sure, but basically kindling stacked high. Fires were so common here, they called them the flowers of Edo, which is a poetic way of saying, yeah, everything burns down a lot. Fact is, Edo's wooden architecture, with its paper screens and straw mats, was a fire's best friend. One stray spark from a hibachi grill, and poof, half the block's gone. You pause at a street corner, noticing a group of men in heavy quilted coats striding past. These are the Hikashi, Edo's firefighters, and those coats aren't just fashion statements. They're soaked in water, designed to shield the wearer from flames. You can't help but smirk. Imagine running into a burning building wearing what's basically a wet blanket. Bet it feels like lugging around a soggy sleeping bag, right? But these coats were genius, a quirky solution to a deadly problem. The Hikashi didn't have fancy hoses or fire trucks. They had guts, buckets, and these bizarre quilted contraptions. You follow the Hikashi, curious, as they weave through the crowd. The coats are thick, stitched with intricate patterns. Dragons, waves, maybe a carp or two. They're not just practical, they're art, screaming, I'm here to fight fire and look cool doing it. You wonder how they even move in those things. Historians still debate whether the coats were more about protection or showing off brigade pride, but you're leaning toward both. The Hikashi were like the rock stars of Edo, saving lives, breaking hearts, and probably complaining about laundry day. You pass a tea house, overhearing a merchant grumble about the latest fire tax. Edo's government knew fires were a constant threat, so they organized firefighting brigades, but it wasn't cheap. The Hikashi were funded partly by locals, which led to some serious side-eye from shopkeepers who'd rather keep their coins. You chuckle, imagining a modern firefighter passing a tip jar mid-rescue. Save my house, but make it quick. I'm not paying overtime. The street smells of cedar and smoke, a reminder that fire's never far away. You notice a kid nearby, playing with a spinning top, oblivious to the danger. It's oddly charming, like watching someone play Jenga on a fault line. The Hikashi's quilted coats, though, were a game changer. Unlike leather or metal armor, these were lightweight, when dry at least, and could be soaked to create a barrier against heat. An odd detail? They sometimes doubled as capes for dramatic entrances, because why not add flair when you're risking your life? You reach the edge of the district, where a small shrine sits, its red gate flickering under torchlight. The Hikashi pause here, offering a quick prayer. You get it. Facing fire in a city like this takes more than skill. It takes luck. You feel the weight of the moment, the crowd's energy, the ever-present threat of flames. It's Edo, and you're right in the middle of it, where every night could end in a blaze or a story. For now, you're just glad you're not the one wearing a wet coat, sprinting toward danger. Bet those Hikashi wished for air conditioning, huh? You're still in Edo, the city's pulse thumping around you as you weave through the crowded streets. the air thick with the scent of charcoal and soy sauce from nearby food stalls. The wooden houses lean close, their eaves almost touching, like they're whispering secrets or plotting to burn. Fire was Edo's constant shadow, and you're about to see why it was such a relentless beast. You're standing near a market, watching a vendor fan a small hibachi grill, sparks dancing like tiny fireflies. One wrong gust of wind, and this whole place could go up. You feel the tension, the way everyone's just one clumsy move from disaster. Honestly, living here's like playing Russian roulette with a matchstick. Fires in Edo weren't just accidents, they were practically a lifestyle. Historical records show that between 1600 and 1868, Edo suffered over 1,700 major fires, some levelling entire districts. The wooden houses, with their paper screens and straw tatami mats, were like a buffet for flames. Add in the tight-packed neighbourhoods, and you've got a city that's basically a giant campfire waiting for a spark. You glance at a nearby alley, so narrow you'd have to turn sideways to squeeze through. No wonder fires spread faster than gossip here. You hear a shout. A vendor's knocked over his grill, and a small flame licks at a bamboo stall. Panic ripples through the crowd. But before you can bolt, a group of haikshi appears, their quilted coats dripping wet, glinting in the sunlight. They move fast, dousing the flames with buckets of water hauled from a nearby well. You're impressed, but also kind of amused. Those coats look like they weigh a ton when wet. Imagine trying to run a 5K in a soggy quilt. Bet they'd kill for a modern fire hose, right? The haikshi's quick work saves the stall, and the crowd cheers, though you catch a few eye rolls from merchants who clearly think this is just another Tuesday. The odd thing, some Edo folks believed fires were purifying, a chance to rebuild better. You raise an eyebrow. Sure, nothing says fresh start like losing your house and half your stuff. Historians still debate whether this purification idea was genuine belief or just a coping mechanism for a city that burned down every other week. You follow the haikshi as they head back to their post, the crowd parting like they're minor celebrities. Their coats, still damp, slap against their legs, leaving little puddles. You can't help but wonder how they don't catch pneumonia in those things. The coats weren't just for show though. They were soaked before every job, creating a barrier against heat and embers. You picture a haikshi dunking their coat in a barrel, probably muttering about how they didn't sign up for this much laundry. It's a far cry from today's high-tech fire gear, but back then, it was cutting edge. You pass a small bridge over a canal, the water below reflecting the orange glow of lanterns. Canals were Edo's lifelines, supplying water for firefighting, but they weren't always enough. You notice a group of kids nearby, tossing pebbles into the water, laughing like they don't have a care in the world. It's cute, but you're thinking, kids, maybe don't play near the flammable city. The haikshi, though, they're unfazed, already joking among themselves, probably about whose coat smells the worst after that last fire. The market's settling down now, but the air still carries a faint smoky tang. You realize Edo's people lived with this constant edge, knowing any moment could bring a blaze. The haikashi and their quilted coats were the city's best defense, but even they couldn't stop every fire. You feel a mix of awe and unease, standing in a place so alive yet so fragile. It's like Edo's daring you to love it, even as it threatens to burn. For now, you're just glad you're not the one hauling buckets or wearing a waterlogged coat. Bet those haikshi dreamed of a day off, maybe with a nice dry kimono. You're still in Edo, the city's heartbeat thrumming as you trail a group of haikashi, their quilted coats swaying like heavy damp banners. The streets are alive with the clatter of gaiter sandals and the hum of conversation. But your focus is on these firefighters, Edo's own daredevils. You're about to meet the haikashi up close, stepping into the shoes of a fresh recruit on their first day, feeling the weight of that iconic quilted coat. It's heavier than you expected, like wearing a soggy mattress, and you're already wondering how anyone runs into a fire with this thing on. Spoiler, You probably wouldn't survive your first shift, but let's give it a shot. The Haikashi were Edo's firefighting elite, formed in the early 1600s as the city's fire problem became impossible to ignore. Official records note that by 1650, organized brigades were a fixture, funded by the shogunate and local merchants to keep the city from burning to a crisp. You're standing outside their station, a sturdy wooden building that smells of wet straw and determination. A grizzled Haikashi captain barks orders, and you're handed a quilted coat, still dripping from its last soak. You pull it on, instantly regretting it as the cold, heavy fabric clings to your shoulders. Bet these guys wished for a hairdryer, huh? You shuffle behind a veteran Haikashi named Taro, who's got the swagger of someone who's stared down flames and won. He's showing you the ropes, literally as you trip over a coil of rope used for rescues. The coat's not just protection, it's a badge of honor. Taro explains how it's soaked before every call, creating a shield against heat. You nod, but you're distracted by the coat's intricate dragon design, stitched in bold reds and blues. It's gorgeous, but you can't help thinking it's a bit extra for a job that's mostly running and sweating. Historians still debate whether these designs were for morale or just to flex on rival brigades, but you're betting Taro loves the style points. The odd detail. Some Haikashi wore their coats inside out during a fire, showing off the plain inner lining to avoid scorching the fancy patterns. You chuckle, imagining Taro flipping his coat like a fashionista mid-blaze. Gotta keep the dragon looking fresh, you mutter, earning a smirk from a nearby recruit. The station's buzzing now, with Haikashi sharpening hooks and testing buckets. You try lifting one of those buckets. Filled with water, it's like hoisting a small cow. Your arms protest, and you're pretty sure you'd rather fight the fire than carry this thing across town. Taro leads you to a training yard where recruits are practicing climbing bamboo ladders. You're supposed to follow, but the coat's dragging you down, and you're panting like you just ran a marathon. The Haikashi's grit is unreal. They trained daily in these soggy beasts, building stamina to charge into infernos. You're starting to respect them, even if you're secretly jealous of their abs. The air smells of sweat and cedar, and you hear the rhythmic thud of feet on the ground, mixed with Taro's good-natured ribbing about your city-soft hands. You pause by a water barrel, catching your breath. A kid nearby is mimicking the Haikashi, swinging a stick like it's a fire hook. It's adorable, like watching a puppy pretend to be a wolf. You grin, but Taro's already moving, calling you to keep up. The quilted coat's starting to feel less like a burden and more like a second skin, though you're still not thrilled about the whole wet dog vibe. The Haikashi weren't just firefighters. They were Edo's lifeline, and you're getting why those coats were their armor. Clunky, sure, but life-saving. For now, you're just trying not to trip again, and you're definitely not dreaming of a cozy office job. Okay, maybe a little. You're still in Edo, the city's energy swirling around you as you duck into a dim workshop, the air thick with the smell of wet cotton and dye. Your quilted coat, still heavy from your recruit training, clings to your shoulders. But now you're about to see where these soggy lifesavers are born. You're in the heart of a Haikashi coat workshop, surrounded by artisans stitching, soaking, and probably complaining about deadlines. The clack of wooden looms and the chatter of workers fill the space, and you're half expecting someone to offer you tea or a towel. Honestly, making these coats looks like a workout, and you're wondering if you'd survive a day in here without spilling dye everywhere. The creation of a Haikashi's quilted coat was a craft rooted in necessity. Historical accounts from the Edo-period describe how artisans layered cotton, stitched it tightly, and soaked it in water to make it fire-resistant. You're standing by a massive wooden tub, watching a worker dunk a coat, the water sloshing like a mini tsunami. The fabric drinks it up, turning from light tan to a dark, heavy mass. You reach out to touch one. Yep, feels like a wet sponge. But somehow it's supposed to keep you from turning into a human yakitori skewer. You smirk, imagining a modern firefighter showing up in this instead of sleek Kevlar. Talk about a glowdown. The artisans are focused, their hands moving like they're conducting a silent orchestra. One guy, probably the workshop's resident comedian, cracks a joke about how the coats are so heavy, even the fire runs away. You chuckle, but you're distracted by the stitching process. The cotton layers are quilted in tight patterns to trap water, making the coat a wearable water balloon. The odd detail? Some artisans added secret pockets for good luck charms, like tiny Buddhist amulets tucked into the lining. You picture a hikashi patting their coat for luck before charging into a blaze. Kind of sweet, kind of wild. You move to another corner, where a woman's painting designs onto a finished coat. Dragons, clouds and waves swirl across the fabric, bold enough to catch the eye, even through smoke. You're impressed, but you can't help wondering if all this art is overkill for something that's just going to get soaked and singed. Historians still debate whether the designs were purely decorative or carried spiritual weight, meant to ward off bad luck. You're leaning toward both because Edo folks loved their aesthetics almost as much as they feared their fires. The workshop's noisy now, with workers shouting measurements over the clatter. You try your hand at folding a dry coat, and, surprise, it's like wrestling a futon. You drop it, earning a playful eye roll from an artisan who's probably seen worse. "Stick to firefighting, kid," he mutters, and you laugh, imagining yourself accidentally stitching your hand to a coat. The air's humid, the floor slick with spilled water, and you're starting to get why these coats were a labour of love. They weren't just gear. They were a promise to the city, crafted to keep the hikeshi alive in a job that was basically a death wish. You step outside for a breather, the street bustling with vendors and stray cats. A kid nearby is playing with a paper kite, oblivious to the workshop's serious business. It's cute, like watching someone doodle during an earthquake. You glance back at the workshop, where the artisans are still at it, their hands shaping Edo's defense against its oldest enemy. The quilted coats are more than fabric. They're a symbol of resilience, even if they smell like a damp laundry basket. You're not sure you'd want to wear one, but you're starting to respect the craft. Bet these artisans wished for a coffee break, though. Sewing for heroes sounds exhausting. You're back in Edo, the city's pulse a steady hum as you linger outside the workshop, the damp scent of freshly dyed cotton still clinging to your clothes. You're holding a quilted hikeshi coat, its surface painted with a swirling dragon that seems to shimmer even in the dim streetlight. You're about to dive into the deeper meaning behind these designs, the stitches that turned a soggy coat into a canvas of culture, the streets alive with the clink of sake cups from a nearby tavern, and you're wondering if you'd survive a night out in Edo. Probably not if you're wearing this heavy coat to a party. It's like showing up to a club in a weighted blanket. The quilted coats weren't just practical. They were steeped in Edo's love for symbolism. Artisans wove meaning into every stitch, with designs like dragons, waves, and carp drawn from Shinto and Buddhist traditions. Dragons, for instance, were tied to water and rain, believed to summon protection against fire. You trace the dragon on your coat, its scales bold and curling, and you can't help but feel a little badass, like you're wearing a superhero cape. But let's be real, running into a fire in this thing. You'd probably trip over your own ego first. Bet the hikeshi wished for a lightweight edition on hot days, huh? You wander toward a small shrine nearby, where a merchant's offering incense, the smoke curling like a tiny dragon itself. The coat's designs weren't just for looks. They carried spiritual weight. Some hikeshi believed the patterns could ward off evil spirits, or at least boost their courage. The odd detail? Certain brigades used unique designs to flex their identity, like gang tattoos, but for firefighters. You smirk, imagining a hikeshi throwing shade at a rival brigade's basic wave pattern. "Nice carp, buddy. Did your mum pick that out?" you mutter, chuckling at your own joke. Historians still debate whether the designs were more about morale or mysticism. Some argue they were practical, making hikeshi visible in smoke. Others say they were pure swagger, a way to stand out in a city obsessed with style. You're leaning toward a mix. Edo folks loved their vibes, but they weren't dumb enough to risk lives for fashion. You slip the coat on just to feel it, and immediately regret it. It's like wearing a wet rug, and you're pretty sure you'd rather fight a fire in flip-flops than lug this around all day. You head toward a tea house, the coat dragging slightly, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Inside, you overhear two merchants gossiping about a recent fire, praising the Haikishi's bravery but side-eyeing their fancy coats. You grin, sipping barley tea that's somehow both bitter and comforting. The coats were a paradox. Gorgeous but clunky. Sacred but soaked. You notice a kid outside, sketching a dragon in the dirt with a stick, mimicking the coat's design. It's adorable, like watching a mini Picasso vibe with street art. You wonder if he dreams of being a Haikishi, or if he just likes cool dragons. The tea house is cozy, lit by lanterns that cast flickering shadows on the walls. You study the coat again, its waves and clouds almost moving in the light. The designs tied the Haikishi to Edo's soul. Water against fire, courage against chaos. But you can't shake the question, were they practical? The weight alone makes you doubt it, yet they saved lives. You lean back, the tea warming your hands, and realize these coats were more than gear. They were stories, stitched to outlast the flames. For now, you're just glad you're not the one washing this thing. Bet the Haikishi had a laundry day horror story or two. You're still in Edo, the city's rhythm pulsing as you stand in a dusty training yard, the sun beating down like it's got a personal vendetta. Your quilted coat, fresh from the workshop's dragon-stamped glory, hangs heavy on your shoulders, already making you sweat buckets. You're with the Haikishi now, thrown into their grueling training, and you're starting to think you wouldn't survive 5 minutes in their world. The air smells of straw and effort, and you hear the rhythmic thwack of wooden poles as recruits practice their moves. These guys are basically the CrossFit champs of the 1700s, and you're just trying not to pass out in your soggy armor. Training for Haikishi was no joke. Historical records show they drilled daily to build the stamina needed to fight fires in Edo's maze of flammable streets. You're handed a bamboo ladder, and Taro, the veteran Haikishi from before, tells you to climb it while wearing the soaked coat. You give it a shot, but it's like scaling a wall with a wet dog strapped to your back. You're panting, and Taro's laughing, saying, "City soft, huh?" You roll your eyes. Bet he'd struggle with a modern treadmill, right? The coat's weight is brutal, but it's designed to protect, soaked to keep flames at bay while you wrestle with ladders and hooks. The odd detail? Hikeishi sometimes trained in deliberately waterlogged coats to simulate real fire conditions, which sounds like the worst kind of method acting. You're dripping now, the coat squelching with every step, and you can't help but laugh. Imagine signing up for this and thinking, yeah, I love cardio in a wet quilt. Historians still debate whether this training was pure discipline or a bit of hazing to weed out the weak. You're leaning toward hazing because no one needs to be this miserable to prove they're tough. You move to the next drill, hauling a bucket of water across the yard. Your arms scream, and you're pretty sure you'd rather negotiate with the fire than carry this thing another step. Nearby, a recruit trips, splashing water everywhere, and the others burst into laughter. It's a moment of levity, like watching someone wipe out on a slip and slide. Taro claps the recruit on the back, joking, "Save some water for the fire, kid." You grin, but you're secretly relieved it wasn't you. The Haikishi's camaraderie is infectious, even if their training feels like a punishment. The yard's buzzing now, with recruits practicing fire hooks, long poles used to tear down burning walls. You try swinging one, and it's like wielding a giant chopstick. You nearly knock over a water barrel, earning a playful scowl from Taro. The quilted coat, though, is the real star here. It's soaked before every drill, mimicking how it's used in a real fire. You're starting to get why it's so heavy. Those layers trap water like a sponge, keeping the Haikishi from roasting. But you're also wondering if they ever dreamed of lighter gear, maybe something less like wearing a portable swamp. You pause by a shaded corner, catching your breath. A kid nearby is watching the drills, wide-eyed, clutching a wooden toy sword like he's ready to join. It's cute, like seeing a puppy dream of being a guard dog. The sun's dipping lower, casting long shadows across the yard, and you feel the weight of the Haikishi's world. Their training wasn't just physical, it was mental, forging them into Edo's last line of defense. You're exhausted just watching, and that coat's starting to feel like a metaphor for their whole deal. Heavy, vital, and a little ridiculous. Bet they wished for a nice, breezy kimono on days like this. You're deep in Edo now, the city cloaked in darkness as you stumble through its narrow streets, the only light coming from flickering lanterns and the occasional glint of moonlight. The air's thick with the smell of cedar and tension, and you're running alongside a team of Haikashi, their quilted coats gleaming wet under the stars. A fire's broken out in a nearby district, and the chaos is real. Shouts, clanging bells, and the distant roar of flames. You're trying to keep up, but that soggy coat you're wearing feels like it's plotting to slow you down. You're thinking you probably wouldn't survive this night shift, and honestly, who could blame you? It's like sprinting through a war zone in a wet sleeping bag. The Haikashi were Edo's rapid response team, often racing to fires at night when the city was most vulnerable. Historical accounts describe how they'd charge into blazes with nothing but buckets, hooks, and those quilted coats, which could weigh up to 20 pounds when soaked. You're panting, dodging a stray cart as you follow Taro, who's barking orders like a drill sergeant with a side hustle as a motivational speaker. The coat's sticking to your skin, and you're wondering if it's protecting you or just making you a slower target. Bet these guys dreamed of a fireproof tracksuit, right? You reach the burning street, where flames are licking at a row of wooden houses. The heat's intense, like standing too close to a barbecue, and you're grateful for the coat's damp layers, even if they're dragging you down. The Haikashi move like a well-oiled machine, hauling water from a canal and swinging fire hooks to collapse burning walls before the fire spreads. The odd detail? Some Haikashi would sing work chants to stay in sync, their voices cutting through the crackle of flames. You try humming along, but it comes out more like a nervous wheeze. Picture karaoke in a furnace. Yeah, it's that wild. Historians still debate whether the quilted coats were lifesavers or liabilities in these chaotic night runs. The water-soaked fabric could fend off embers, but the weight slowed down even the toughest Haikashi. You're leaning toward lifesaver because you're not crispy yet, but you're definitely feeling the burn in your legs. You trip over a stray plank and Taro hauls you up, chuckling, "Stay upright, city soft." You laugh, but you're secretly wishing for a nap, or at least a lighter coat. The scene's a blur of smoke and motion. You help pass a bucket, splashing half of it on yourself, and the Haikashi around you don't even flinch. They're too busy fighting the blaze. A kid nearby, probably woken by the chaos, is peeking out from a doorway, clutching a rag doll. It's cute, but heartbreaking, like watching a tiny fan at a disaster movie premiere. You want to tell him to run, but the Haikishi's got this, or at least they're trying. The coats, shining under moonlight, make them look like soggy superheroes, and you're starting to get why Edo loved them, even if they smelled like a damp basement. The fire's under control now, but the streets, a mess, charred wood, puddles, and exhausted Haikashi leaning on their hooks. You're soaked, not just from the coat, but from sweat and splashed water. The air's still smoky, stinging your eyes, but there's a strange calm settling in. You realize the Haikashi don't just fight fires. They fight for Edo's soul, night after night. You're dead tired, and that coat's starting to feel like a badge of survival. Bet they wished for a hot bath and a stiff drink after nights like this, though. You're still in Edo, the smoky tang of last night's fire lingering in the air as you stand in a cluttered Haikashi station, your quilted coat finally dry, but still smelling like a damp campfire. The morning sun filters through paper screens, casting soft light on an array of tools, ladders, hooks, and clunky water pumps that look like they belong in a museum of stuff you wouldn't want to carry. You're about to get a crash course in the Haikishi's gear and how those quilted coats worked with it to keep them alive. Honestly, you're wondering if you'd survive lifting half this stuff, let alone using it in a blaze. It's like signing up for a gym session with a dragon breathing down your neck. The Haikishi's toolkit was basic but clever, designed for a city where fires were as common as rainy days. Historical records from the Edo-period list essentials like bamboo ladders for scaling walls, iron-tipped hooks for tearing down burning structures, and wooden pumps that sprayed water, if you were strong enough to work them. You're handed a fire hook, a long pole that's heavier than it looks, and you give it a swing, nearly toppling a stack of buckets. Taro, the veteran Haikishi, laughs, saying, "Stick to splashing water, city soft." You smirk. Bet he'd struggle with a modern fire extinguisher's instruction manual, huh? You move to the water pump, a boxy contraption that looks like a rejected carpentry project. You try pumping it, and it's like arm wrestling a mule. Water sputters out in sad little spurts, and you're pretty sure you'd rather just yell at the fire to stop. The odd detail. Some pumps were so finicky, Haikishi would oil them with fish fat to keep them working. You wrinkle your nose, imagining the smell of fishy water spraying everywhere. Historians still debate whether the quilted coats were designed to work with these tools or just added extra hassle. Wet coats made gripping hooks slippery, but they kept embers from setting you on fire. The quilted coat's role shines here. Soaked, it shielded Haikishi from sparks as they swung hooks or hauled ladders into burning buildings. You pull your coat tighter, noticing how it cushions your shoulders when you lean against a ladder. It's clunky, sure, but it's like wearing a hug from a very wet grandma. You chuckle, picturing a Haikeshi dodging flames while looking like a soggy superhero. The station's buzzing now, with recruits polishing tools and joking about who dropped a hook in the last drill. One guy mimics the pump's sputter, earning a round of laughs. It's like watching a stand-up routine in a firehouse. You step outside, where a kid's playing with a tiny toy ladder, pretending to be a Haikishi. It's cute, like seeing a toddler cosplay as a construction worker. You grin, but your arms are still sore from that pump, and you're starting to get why the Haikishi were built like oxes. The coat, the hooks, the ladders. It's all a system, clunky but life-saving. You glance at a canal nearby, its water glinting in the sun, ready to feed those pumps. The Haikishi's world was one of grit and ingenuity, and you're kind of awed, even if you're glad you don't have to clean fish fat off a pump. Bet they wished for a nice shiny hose, or at least a day without splinters. You're still in Edo, the morning air crisp as you slip into a bustling tea house, the quilted coat slung over your shoulder like a badge of survival from last night's fire. The place smells of roasted tea and steamed rice, with merchants and townsfolk swapping stories over wooden tables. You're here to eavesdrop on the chatter about the Haikishi, Edo's firefighting heroes, and figure out where they stood in this city's pecking order. Were they legends or outcasts? The answer's murkier than the canal water outside, and you're starting to think you wouldn't survive the social tightrope they walked. It's like being a rock star with a side gig as the town's punching bag. The Haikishi were a paradox in Edo society, revered for their bravery but often shunned for their rough edges. Historical records show they were mostly low-class workers, often former labourers or even ex-criminals, hired for their strength and nerve. You settle into a corner, sipping tea that's somehow both bitter and soothing, and overhear a merchant grumbling about the Haikishi's rowdy behaviour. "They save your shop, then drink your sake," he mutters. You smirk. Bet he'd complain less if his roof was still on fire, right? The quilted coats with their bold designs made Haikeshi stand out, but that visibility cut both ways, drawing admiration and suspicion. You catch a snippet of gossip about a Haikeshi who got into a brawl at a sack shop last week. The odd detail. Some Haikeshi were rumoured to start small fires, just to prove their worth, though there's no solid proof. You raise an eyebrow, imagining a Haikeshi flicking a spark like a kid playing a prank. Historians still debate whether the hakeshi were true community pillars or just tolerated for their utility. Some say their flashy coats and bravado made them seem like Edo's version of gangsters. You're leaning toward heroes with flaws, because nobody runs into flames for clout without some serious guts. The tea house is lively now, with a storyteller spinning a tale about a hakeshi saving a child from a blaze, his quilted coat steaming as he emerged. The crowd claps, but you notice a few skeptical glances, like they're not sure if it's truth or hype. You lean back, the coat's weight a reminder of the hakeshi's burden, saving lives while dodging dirty looks. You try to imagine being them, celebrated one day, side-eyed the next. It's like being a celebrity chef who's always burning the toast. You chuckle, picturing a hakeshi shrugging off the gossip with a grin and a wet coat. Outside, a kid's playing with a stick, pretending it's a firehook, mimicking the hakeshi's swagger. It's adorable, like watching a puppy try to howl like a wolf. You step into the street, the tea house buzz fading behind you. The hakeshi's quilted coats were their armor, but they couldn't shield them from society's mixed feelings. You pass a shrine, where someone's left an offering for the hakeshi, a small nod to their role as protectors. It's a reminder that, despite the whispers, Edo needed them. You're starting to respect their hustle, even if their social status was as shaky as the city's wooden houses. Bet they wished for a day when the cheers drowned out the grumbles. You're still in Edo, the city's morning bustle, humming as you climb a rickety wooden fire tower, your quilted coat dragging like a soggy anchor. The air up here is cooler, laced with the faint smell of pine and distant smoke, and you're getting a bird's-eye view of the city's sprawling wooden maze. You're with a hakeshi lookout, his eyes scanning the horizon for the telltale curl of smoke. This tower's your perch to understand how the hakeshi coordinated their firefights, with those quilted coats playing a surprising role in teamwork. You're gripping the railing, wondering if you'd survive a shift up here without tripping over your own feet. It's like being a lifeguard, except the pool's on fire. Fire towers were Edo's early warning system, strategically placed to spot blazes before they swallowed whole districts. Historical records from the 1700s describe lookouts using bells and flags to signal fires, directing hakeshi brigades across the city. You watch the lookout, a wiry guy named Kenta, raise a flag with a wave pattern that matches his quilted coat. The coat's design isn't just for show. It's a visual cue, helping brigades identify their own in the chaos. You try waving a flag yourself, but it's heavier than it looks, and you nearly knock over Kenta's water jug. He laughs, saying, "Stick to climbing, city soft." Bet he'd fumble a smartphone signal, huh? The odd detail? Some lookouts tied tiny bells to their coats, so their movements jingled, signaling nearby hakeshi without needing a shout. You jingle Kenta's coat, grinning at the sound, like a cat collar for firefighters. Historians still debate whether the coat's designs were more about team unity or just Edo's obsession with flair. You're leaning toward unity because up here, where one wrong call could doom a neighborhood, teamwork's everything. You scan the city, spotting a thin wisp of smoke in the distance. Kenta's already ringing the bell, his coat flapping as he signals the brigade below. You clamber down the tower, your coat catching on a splintered rung, and join the hakeshi rushing toward the smoke. The streets are a blur of shouts and sandals, and you're panting, the coat's weight reminding you why you're not cut out for this. The lookout signal was spot on, and you see hakeshi in matching dragon-patterned coats forming a bucket line. You try to keep up, splashing water from a bucket and feeling like a kid in a water fight, except the stakes are way higher. The coat's damp layers keep embers off your skin, and you're grudgingly grateful, even if it feels like wearing a wet sleeping bag. A kid nearby, watching from a safe distance, waves a stick like it's a signal flag, mimicking the lookout. It's cute, like seeing a toddler direct traffic. You smile, but the fire's crackling, and you're focused on not dropping your bucket. The quilted coats, with their bold patterns, aren't just armor. They're a rallying point, tying the team together in the smoke and chaos. You glance back at the tower, Kenta still up there, his coat a speck against the sky. The Haikishi's system of signals and teamwork saved lives, and you're starting to see why those coats were worth their weight. Bet they wished for a megaphone on days when the wind drowned out the bells, though. You're in Edo, the year 1657, and the city's a tinderbox on the edge of catastrophe. You're running through streets choked with smoke, your quilted coat heavy and damp, as the great Meireki fire rages around you. The air stings with ash, and the roar of flames drowns out panicked shouts from fleeing townsfolk. You're with the Haikishi, battling a blaze that's rewriting Edo's history, and those quilted coats are your only shield against a fire that's eating the city alive. You're wondering if you'd survive 10 minutes in this inferno. Spoiler, probably not. It's like sprinting through a barbecue with a wet towel for armor. The Meireki fire of 1657 was a monster, destroying over 60% of Edo and killing thousands. Historical records peg the death toll at up to 100,000. It started with a spark in a temple, fanned by dry winds, and turned wooden neighborhoods into a sea of flames. You're dodging falling beams, your coat steaming as embers land on it. The Haikishi are everywhere, hauling buckets and swinging fire hooks, their dragon-patterned coats glinting through the haze. You try to help, passing a bucket, but your arms are shaking, and you're pretty sure you'd rather be anywhere else. Bet the Haikishi wished for a rainstorm right about now, huh? The odd detail? Some Haikishi tied ropes to their coats, anchoring themselves to wells or posts to avoid getting lost in the smoke. You notice Taro, the veteran, tethered like that, his coat's dragon design barely visible as he tears down a burning wall. You're impressed, but also thinking it's like bungee jumping into a volcano. Historians still debate whether the quilted coats were lifesavers or liabilities in a fire this massive. Some say they slowed the Haikishi down. Others swear they kept them alive. You're leaning toward lifesaver because without this soggy quilt, you'd be a crispy footnote by now. The fire's relentless, swallowing shops and homes as you stumble through the chaos. You see a Haikishi pull a child from a collapsing doorway, his coat steaming as he shields her from sparks. The crowd's a mix of gratitude and panic, some shouting thanks, others just running. You pass a bucket to a Haikishi, your hands slippery from the coat's dampness, and mutter, "This is why I'd stick to office jobs." A nearby recruit laughs, but it's strained. He's as scared as you. The coat's weight is killing you, but it's keeping embers off your skin, and you're grudgingly grateful. A kid nearby, clutching a singed doll, watches the Haikishi with wide eyes, like they're mythical heroes. It's heartbreakingly cute, like seeing hope in the middle of a disaster movie. You pause by a canal, the water black with ash, as the Haikishi keep fighting. The quilted coats, soaked and heavy, let them dive into the heat and come out alive, mostly. You're exhausted, your lungs burning, but the Haikishi's grit is unreal. The Meireki fire changed Edo forever, forcing new building codes and better brigades, but right now you're just trying to survive the night. The city's a glowing wound, and you're in awe of the Haikishi who face it head-on. Bet they dreamed of a cold drink and a long nap after this. You're still in Edo, the scars of the Meireki fire lingering in the air as you stand in a rebuilt district, the smell of fresh-cut cedar mixing with the faint char of memory. It's a few years after 1657, and the city's trying to claw its way back, with the Haikishi at the forefront of smarter firefighting. Your quilted coat, still heavy with its dragon design, feels like a link to that fiery night. But now you're seeing how Edo adapted. New tools, better coats, and a stubborn refusal to let fire win. You're wondering if you'd survive keeping up with these upgrades. It's like trying to debug a city that's coded to burn. After the Meireki fire, Edo's Haikishi didn't just dust themselves off, they innovated. Historical records show the shogunate pushed for better firefighting systems, including wider streets and improved water pumps by the 1660s. You're in a training yard, eyeing a new wooden pump that's supposed to spray water farther. You give it a try, cranking the handle, and it sputters like a grumpy old man before squirting a weak stream. You laugh. Bet modern firefighters would trade this for a garden hose in a heartbeat. The quilted coats got upgrades too, with tighter stitching to hold more water, making them heavier but tougher against flames. The odd detail? Some hikshi started using ash as a makeshift coolant, rubbing it into their coats to block heat. You try it, smearing ash on your sleeve, and it feels like a gritty spa treatment gone wrong. Historians still debate whether these post-Mereki changes, better pumps, ash tricks, reinforced coats, were game changers or just desperate tweaks to a losing battle. You're leaning toward tweaks because Edo still burned regularly, but you respect the effort. You're handed a bucket for a drill, and it's got a newfangled handle that's supposed to make passing easier. Spoiler, it's still heavy, and you nearly drop it, muttering, "This is why I'd stick to keyboards." The yard's alive with hikshi testing the new gear, their coats steaming as they practice soaking them. Taro, the veteran, shows you how to angle the pump for maximum spray, joking, "Aim better than my cousin's cooking." You grin, but your arms are screaming, and you're starting to get why these guys were built like oxen. The coats, now thicker, are even harder to move in, but they let hikshi work closer to flames without roasting. You notice a kid nearby, mimicking the pump's motion with a stick, like he's training to be a mini hikshi. It's cute, like watching a toddler pretend to fix a car. You pause by a canal, where new stone linings make water access easier. Another Mereki lesson. The city's changing, but the hikishi's spirit, wrapped in those quilted coats, stays fierce. You're impressed by their grit, even if the new pumps feel like a steampunk fever dream. The air's warm, the sun glinting off the canal, and you feel Edo's pulse, rebuilt, but always ready to burn again. You're glad you're not the one hauling these buckets full time, but you're starting to see the hikashi as innovators, not just survivors. Bet they wished for a day when fireproof wasn't just a pipe dream. You're still in Edo, the city's energy crackling as you weave through a crowded street, your quilted coat brushing against passers-by. The sun's high, glinting off the dragon design on your sleeve, and you're caught in the middle of a lively dispute between two hikashi brigades, their voices rising over the clatter of carts and vendors. These rival crews, each sporting distinct coat patterns, are squaring off like they're about to start a dance battle or a brawl. You're wondering if you'd survive picking a side in this turf war. It's like choosing between rival sports teams, except the playbook involves fire and wet quilts. Rivalries among hikashi brigades were a real thing in Edo, fueled by pride and territorial claims. Historical records from the late 1600s describe brigades competing for prestige, each with unique coat designs, like waves, carp or tigers, to mark their turf. You're standing near a canal, watching two groups face off, one in dragon coats, the other in swirling cloud patterns. They're arguing over who saved a merchant's shop last week, their voices loud but laced with grins. You try to stay neutral, but when a dragon coat hikshi offers you a rice ball, you're tempted to cheer for them. Bet these guys wished for a referee sometimes, huh? The odd detail. Brigades sometimes sabotaged each other's water buckets during fires, just to one-up their rivals. You spot a cloud coat hikshi accidentally nudge a dragon bucket into the canal, and you can't help but chuckle. It's like petty office drama, but with higher stakes. Historians still debate whether these rivalries strengthened the hikishi's resolve or just made firefighting messier. You're leaning toward messier because nothing says teamwork like stealing someone's bucket mid-blaze. You dodge a playful shove between two hikishi, their coats flapping like capes in a superhero showdown. The street's buzzing now, with onlookers placing bets on which brigade's tougher. You join the crowd, munching on that rice ball, and notice the coat's designs shining in the sun. Dragons versus clouds, like a fashion face-off. The rivalry's not just about bragging rights. It's about who gets the best funding from merchants or the shogunate. You try lifting a bucket to look useful, but it's heavy, and you nearly splash a nearby vendor who glares like you just insulted his ancestors. "Stick to watching," he mutters, and you laugh, imagining a hikeshi bragging about their superior splash technique. A kid nearby is mimicking the brigades, waving a stick like it's a firehook, his tiny face torn between dragons and clouds. It's adorable, like watching a toddler pick a favorite superhero. You grin, but the tension's rising. Someone's shouting about a new fire nearby, and both brigades snap into action, rivalries forgotten. You trail them, your coat slowing you down, and see how their unique patterns help them spot each other in the smoke. The dragon and cloud coats blend into a single force, buckets flying, hooks swinging. You're impressed, even if you're panting just keeping up. These rivalries gave the hikeshi edge, but when fire called, they were all Edos. Bet they wished for a day without drama though. Just buckets and no bickering. You're still in Edo, but the scene shifts. Suddenly, you're not in the smoky streets of the 1700s anymore. You're standing in a quiet, modern museum in Tokyo, the air cool and clean, with the faint hum of air conditioning replacing the clatter of Edo's crowds. Your quilted coat is gone, but there's one on display. Its dragon design faded, but proud behind glass. You're here to reflect on the legacy of the hikeshi and their soggy, life-saving coats, tracing how they shaped a city that burned and rebuilt itself over and over. You're wondering if you'd survive a day in their world. Probably not, but touching. This relic makes you feel a little closer to their fireproof spirit. It's like holding a piece of history, minus the wet dog smell. The hikashi's quilted coats left a mark on Edo's culture, blending practicality with a flair that's still celebrated today. Museum exhibits and historical texts note that these coats inspired later firefighting traditions, with their designs echoing in modern Japanese festivals, where firefighters parade in similar gear. You run your fingers along the glass case, marveling at the coat's intricate stitching. It's heavier than it looks, even now, and you're grateful you don't have to wear it into a blaze. Bet modern firefighters would trade their gear for this just for the style points, huh? The odd detail. Some hikeshi coats were repurposed as theatre costumes after they wore out, their bold patterns stealing the show in Edo's kabuki plays. You chuckle, picturing a dramatic actor swirling a dragon coat on stage, probably hamming it up for the crowd. Historians still debate whether the coat's legacy is more about their utility or their role as cultural icons. Did they save Edo, or just make it look cool while it burned? You're leaning toward both because these coats were as much about heart as they were about heat. You wander past a display of fire hooks and buckets, each a reminder of the hikeshi's grit. The museum's quiet, save for a group of school kids nearby, sketching the coat's designs with crayons. One kid's dragon looks more like a funky lizard, and you grin. It's cute, like watching history get a kid-friendly remix. You pause by a replica pump, tempted to try it, but remembering your sore arms from that training yard. The hikashi's legacy isn't just in these artifacts. It's in the way Edo learned to fight fire, paving the way for Tokyo's resilience. The coats, with their soaked layers and bold art, were a symbol of defiance against a city's oldest enemy. You feel a quiet awe, standing here where past meets present. You step outside, the Tokyo skyline glittering under a calm sky. The air's fresh, no trace of smoke, and you realize how far the city's come from Edo's flammable days. The hikeshi and their quilted coats are a story of survival, stitched into Japan's history. You're not hauling buckets or dodging flames, but you carry a piece of their courage as you walk away. The museum's glow fades behind you, and you're left with a sense of connection to those soggy, dragon-clad heroes. Bet they'd be amazed to see their coats in a museum, not a fire. You're no longer in the museum, but back in Edo one last time, sitting by a flickering lantern in a quiet corner of the city. The night is soft, the air cool with the scent of cedar and distant rain, and your quilted coat rests beside you, its dragon design catching the light like a fading dream. The streets are calm now. the bustle of merchants, and the clang of fire bells replaced by the gentle hum of crickets. You're reflecting on the Heikshi, their soggy coats, and the city they fought to save, feeling the weight of their story settle over you like a warm blanket. You're wondering if you'd have survived their world. Probably not, but the thought of their courage lulls you into a peaceful haze. It's like drifting off in a history book, with embers and dragons dancing in your mind. The Heikashi's legacy, wrapped in those quilted coats, was more than just firefighting. It was about staring down chaos and choosing to run toward it. Historical records show their methods, from soaked coats to bucket brigades, became the backbone of Edo's survival, influencing firefighting long after the city became Tokyo. You lean back, the lantern's glow softening, and picture Taro, the veteran Hikishi, laughing as he hauled buckets in his dragon coat. You smile, imagining him in modern Tokyo, probably baffled by fire trucks, but proud his coats are museum treasures. Bet he'd trade all that for a quiet night like this, huh? The odd detail? Some Heikshi left their coats as offerings at shrines, believing the soaked fabric carried prayers for safety. You glance at your coat, wondering if it holds a bit of that old magic. Historians still debate whether the Heikashi's bravery outshone their quirks, those rivalries, those heavy coats, or if it was all part of their charm. You're leaning toward charm because it takes a special kind of soul to wear a wet quilt and call it armor. The lantern flickers, and you feel the city's pulse slow, as if Edo itself is ready to rest. You notice a kid nearby, asleep against a wall, clutching a toy firehook like a teddy bear. It's adorable, like a tiny guardian dreaming of dragons. The night wraps around you, the stars above Edo faint but steady, and you're drifting, carried by the rhythm of the Heikashi's story, their coats, their grit, their ridiculous, beautiful defiance. It all blurs into a soft, warm haze. You're safe here, in this moment, the fires of Edo just a memory, the quilted coats a whisper of courage. Let the lantern dim, let the crickets sing, and let the city sleep. The Heikashi of Edo, Japan were more than firefighters. They were the heartbeat of a city that burned and rose again. Their quilted coats, soaked and stitched with dragons and waves, were both shield and symbol, blending practicality with Edo's love for art. You walked their streets, felt the weight of their gear, and ran through the chaos of fires like the Meireki blaze of 1657. From workshops to rivalries, training yards to fire towers, you saw how these heroes balanced bravery with quirks, saving a city that seemed determined to burn. Their legacy lives in Tokyo's resilience, in museum displays, and in the stories whispered by lanterns. As the night fades, so does the heat of Edo's flames, leaving only the soft glow of courage to carry you into sleep.